and it ended at around 9 o'clock, so we had very, very little time for discussion. Everybody wanted to leave. We did have lots of leftover pizza. That always bothers me. And we throw out a lot of pizza.
I've never seen that happen.
Well, it does, actually. Sure, I've seen it. Because we bought way too much pizza for how many people came. So that happens. And then today, the conference started, which I have advertised on my door. And we had several faculty presentations on cyber ethics, especially robot ethics. And one of the visiting guest speakers is from Japan and has brought Paro, or it's a robot that's like a seal, it's shaped like a baby seal, and as you pet it, it responds to you and so on. So Professor Hiroko Harakawa, I've known her for like 20 years, and I still cannot get her name right. Hiroko, whatever her name, Japanese teacher. She went with them to the senior center and filmed people in the center playing with that, and it's a therapy thing, and I guess it works as good as a pet. Plus, it doesn't poo on your floor, so I guess that's an added bonus. So that's interesting. He'll be showing that around at 10:30 tomorrow down at Library 307. So the consortium library, room 307. I haven't seen it yet myself, except for the pictures, and I can imagine. But after watching the movie last night, I wouldn't give it a knife.
Which movie did you watch?
Ex Machina.
Oh, that's a good movie.
Yeah.
I haven't seen it. I need to see that.
Sorry, I should
No,
have
it's
mentioned
okay.
the nice
It's okay.
guy. However,
The letter that was great.
so I'm missing the opening lecture by the visiting speaker tonight because I'm here, but that's, that happens. And
You can make that a class extra.
Yeah.
Either go to class or go to that.
I think it starts at 7, but it's not really apropos to ancient philosophy. It's, we could always, you could always make up something. But shoot, what's my password? Oh, Iris. It's pretty bad when I've got to ask you guys what my password is. I guess I got it.
Even worse if we can tell you what it is.
Philosophy Rocks. 16.
No. I have, I think, 15 asterisks in a row. And you use that? Asterisk. That's a joke, of course. However, so yeah, tomorrow should be interesting, and it goes, I think, all the way to pretty late tomorrow night because of all the discussions and stuff, student papers and things. We had 4 student papers this morning after the faculty presentations. Hiroko did one, Professor Paul Dunscombe from the history department did one, DJ from our department did one, Dr. Joy, and that was it. Oh, no, and there's another one. He's from some Chinese university. In fact, he's been here before. I think he's even the one who talked about the problem of metaphysics in Chinese years ago. I think he's the same one. And he gave a presentation on cyber ethics and things. So it's really been interesting, because of course this is happening, computers are, I pointed out that I had, with my Fitbit, I have a scale. I don't know if I told you, I have a scale that connects to my Fitbit, so it like keeps records and so on of my weight and so on. And one morning I logged into my email and I had an email message from my bathroom scale. And that just really freaked me out, because I've never gotten an email message from an appliance before. So that was weird, and I opened it up because I thought, you gotta be kidding me. My bathroom scale doesn't email me? What the heck? I opened it up and it said, my batteries are low. Please change my batteries.
My car does that. It'll send like service emails.
Oh yeah, my computer tells me, right now one of my license plate lights is out. So I've gotta fix that. But now whenever I go into the bathroom, I look at the scale and I wonder, what else is it telling the world about me, 'Cause I don't get weighed in the nude anymore. Just feels too, creepy, How
Send you one that said, it'll be more accurate if you do it nude.
That's, that would, it would email me that message, right? Which you know that the NSA is getting that too, right? So,
Yeah.
so all of that. Remember, I worked at the NSA for 4.5 years. That was before there was an internet.
Probably a good thing.
We had a network, but of course it was just point to point.
Yeah, local.
However, it was while I was in Kenya when the internet really started moving. We still had BB bulletin boards, remember? You dial them up with a little device that would go. Then you had some weird old lady sitting there typing, how are you this evening? Got any good files for me? Remember, that was pre-internet. Actually, I'm just making up the voice because I never actually met any of the people on the BBs, and they were all local, right? You would like dial Afghanistan, to hook up to a BB. So that was pretty good. So that's all if you're interested. Okay, so quiz question was, I think, what kind of government do we actually have? I got lots of interesting responses to that. I think for those that said, gosh, it's not really cut and dry, there's not really one particular formatted kind of government we have, I think that's certainly correct. It's also pretty clear that we don't just simply have a democracy, because that means everybody votes, and we don't actually, get anything done. In fact, I don't know what you think of him, but so this is David Brooks. Any of you read David Brooks routinely? He's a conservative, officially. The last couple of, I know, and just read this and think, whoa, what does this mean with regard to our government? The governing cancer of our time. That's pretty interesting. We live in a big, diverse society. There are essentially two ways to maintain order and get things done in such a society: politics or some form of dictatorship, either through compromise or brute force. Our founding fathers chose politics. Politics is an activity in which you recognize the simultaneous existence of different groups, interests, and opinions. You try to find some way to balance or reconcile or compromise those interests, or at least a majority of them. You You follow a set of rules enshrined in a constitution or in custom to help you reach these compromises in a way everybody considers legitimate. The downside of politics is that people never really get everything they want. It's messy, limited, and no issue is ever really settled. Politics is muddled activity in which people have to recognize restraints and settle for less than they want. Disappointment is normal. But that's sort of the beauty of politics too. It involves an endless conversation in which we learn about other people and see things from their vantage point and try to balance their needs against our own. Perhaps, I guess I don't remember that word. Plus, it's better than the alternative, rule by some authoritarian tyrant who tries to govern by clobbering everyone in his way. As Bernard Crick wrote in his book In Defense of Politics, haven't read it, but there it is. Politics is a way of ruling divided societies without undue violence. Over the past generation, we have seen the rise of a group of people who are against politics. These groups, best exemplified by the Tea Party, right? Taxed enough already party, but not exclusive to the right, want to elect people who have no political experience. They want outsiders. They delegitimize compromise and deal-making. They're willing to trample the customs and rules that give legitimacy to legislative decision-making if it helps them gain power. Ultimately, they don't recognize other people. They suffer from a form of political narcissism in which they don't accept the legitimacy of other interests and opinions. They don't recognize restraints. They want total victories for themselves and their doctrine. This anti-politics tendency has a wretched effect on our democracy. It has led to a series of overlapping downward spirals. The anti-politics people elect legislators who have no political skills or experience. That incompetence leads to dysfunctional government, which leads to more disgust with government, which leads to a demand for even more outsiders. The anti-politics people don't accept that politics is a limited activity. They make soaring promises and raise ridiculous expectations. When those expectations are not met, voters grow cynical and disgusted, turn even further in the direction of anti-politics. The anti-politics people refuse compromise, and so block the legislative process. The absence of accomplishment destroys public trust. The decline in trust makes deal-making harder. We're now at a point where the Senate says it won't even hold hearings on a presidential Supreme Court nominee in clear defiance of custom and the Constitution.
That's not right there.
I'm not,
I know,
not necessarily agreeing with everything he says. We're now at a point in which politicians live in fear if they try to compromise and legislate. We're now at a point in which normal political conversation has broken down. People feel unheard, which makes them shout even louder, which further destroys conversation. And in walks Donald Trump. People say that Trump is an unconventional candidate and that he represents a break from politics as usual. That's not true. Trump is the culmination of the trends we have been seeing for the last 30 years. The desire for outsiders, the bashing style of rhetoric that makes conversation impossible, the decline of coherent political parties, the declining importance of policy, the tendency to fight cultural battles and identity wars through political means. Trump represents the path the founders rejected. There is a hint of violence undergirding his campaign. There's always a whiff, and sometimes more than a whiff, of I'd like to punch him in the face. I printed out a Times list of the insults Trump has hurled on Twitter. The list took up 33 pages. Trump's style is bashing and pummeling. Everyone who opposes or disagrees with him is an idiot, a moron, or a loser. The implied promise of his campaign is that he will come to Washington and bully his way through. Trump's supporters aren't looking for a political process to address their needs. They are looking for a superhero. As the political scientist Matthew McWilliams found, the one trait that best predicts whether you're a Trump supporter is how high you score on tests that measure authoritarianism. This isn't just an American phenomenon. Politics is in retreat and authoritarianism is on the rise worldwide. The answer to Trump is politics. It's acknowledging other people exist. It's taking pleasure in that difference and hammering out workable arrangements. As Harold Lasky put it, we shall make the basis of our state consent to disagreement. Therein shall we ensure its deepest harmony. So that's David Brooks. That was today, right?
I was thinking, oh, wow.
Is that
Now, what were you saying wasn't
Yes.
true? What did he actually state? And you said that-
whether or not there's been a delay to the next president
Yep,
selecting, or even discussing nominees for the Supreme Court. Yeah.
It hasn't happened
Yeah.
in almost over 100 years, and Joe Biden and Barack Obama, back in the first George W. Bush's father,
We're actually voting against it. Yeah,
Biden came out
right,
and said, we
right.
can't do this during an election year, so
Right.
the hypocrisy is strong, it's ridiculous.
It's trying to have it both ways.
But he's not a Democrat. He's, right?
He's not, but he's,
I don't
he's-
think anything he's saying is
I think what he's,
anti-right. I think
Yeah.
he's just describing what's going on.
yeah, well, I've noticed a lot of people that are traditionally on the right and conservative are very upset with Trump's dominating.
they are.
Yeah, because, and he's, actually, it was about 8 years ago, I think, in one of the TV, he's on TV a lot too. And one of the things he said is that it's going to take 2 more cycles before the Republican Party completely self-destructs.
I wouldn't disagree with that.
And that's in a way, something that, we could go back and say, wow. I think I mentioned him once before, and I pointed out that one of the things he says is he's always wrong, and then he turned out to be right. So he was wrong about thinking that he was going to be wrong. So that's kind of interesting.
I think it was interesting that he said that for example, like the Tea Party, can you scroll down a little bit? Let me look at it here real quick.
It's not the only one. that
Well,
is so-
they say that people are calling that, for non-politicians to leave the country, and we can't have that because basically you're gonna fuck everything up. Well, look at our country now, look at our deficits. We've had politicians for 240 years, you know what I mean? And they've just,
And I
they
would
destroyed
certainly
our
argue that
economy.
Trump is a politician.
I'm sorry.
He's never held a political office.
No, he hasn't. And
No,
that's
but
part of his appeal. That's why a lot of
he's
people
in a
like him.
campaign for president of the United States. That, in my book, makes him a politician.
Yeah.
Once he's elected.
Yeah, he's still
I think they're talking about like career politicians, which is
Right.
I mean,
Yeah, absolutely.
think about how hard it probably is for like a first-term congressman or something to come in and actually try to get something
Accomplish
done.
something. Yeah.
But
they have to learn the
I-
ropes, and they come in with ideas, and they say, "Oh, I want to do this.
And then
I'm
realize
not going
that
to vote
there's
for that."
no chance
And they
it's
take
gonna
them aside to the other room and say, "Okay, this is how it works. You vote
Let me
for
show you
my
how it's done."
earmarks, and I'll vote for yours." Otherwise, you don't get anything done. Okay. And it happens at local levels too. Charles Woolforth, if you read him, he's been in the paper now a lot since the Alaska Dispatch has basically hired him to do a every other day column or something. He's if you remember years ago, he was on the assembly, and he was eligible, of course, to run for a second term for that position. And he opted out, and he said, no, because, I don't like how all these decisions have to be done in the back room. It's not up front, it's not something that everybody can see what's going on. There's all this stuff that happens in the back, and it's all money involved in stuff and so on. So, it just in general, if we're looking at Aristotle and trying to figure out, well, okay, here's kind of an original arrangement of how governments are set up. And he's certainly looking at all the different city-states had different types of government. So in a sense, he's doing just like he does with all the other subjects he's examining. He's kind of cataloging the types and categorizing everything in terms of what characteristics they have and so on. And he gives you what basic 3 types of government. it's kind of interesting. I'm also reading Cicero's Republic, which is he's one I was going to mention tonight. Cicero wrote this basically as the Roman response to Plato's Republic. And he basically starts it off, he's kind of imitating how the Republic starts. So all these guys are showing up for basically a discussion, etc. And you're getting introduced to who they are and all that sort of thing. They're all friends and so on. And Scipio is, if you remember, Scipio was the general who finally beat Hannibal, right? In fact, so Scipio's name is also Africanus, right? So his title for his accomplishment beating Hannibal, because remember Hannibal crossed the Alps with the elephants. What was he thinking? That scared the crap out of everybody, including the hobbits sitting in the grass. Sorry about that. I'm mentally ill. But then eventually he went back, right, and ended up then with several battles in Africa, and eventually lost in one where Scipio used a new technique to avoid the elephants, etc. In a narrow strip of beach, etc. I don't know if you're familiar with that kind of stuff. So Scipio is the Roman hero, because he's the one that finally beats up Hannibal. He does away with a major threat to Rome. And he's the main character that's going to start this discussion about what kind of government is good. And of course, it's going to be the Roman Republic is good. So Cicero actually, of course, has an agenda. I'm pretty darn sure this discussion, I don't think anyone thinks that this actually occurred, right? Any more than, say, Plato's Republic actually occurred with everyone all sitting around. Maybe they did. Maybe it was multiple discussions, but it's clearly a narratively constructed piece, right? And so is this. But what's interesting is they're basing it off of the Greek masters. So they're accepting basically Plato and Aristotle, mostly Plato, and arguing, okay, so this is the kinds of governments there are. Which of these is best? Kind of a combination, they say. They don't leap right to an aristocracy, basically, as you would think from Plato and Aristotle, but instead they go to they're very pro-democracy in the text. They're very pro-democracy in the text. Although, of course, if you're familiar with the Roman government, they weren't real Democrats either. They voted for their Senate, really very close to our republic. There's probably even some resemblance in the way our founding fathers originated our republic based on the Roman model, much closer than what we see, for example, in Plato. So Cicero is probably a very important part of that. Remember, Jefferson traveled a lot around Europe, not only learning stuff about government and so on, what governments worked and so on, but he was also there for the architecture. So when we think about, if you've been around DC and you can see, clearly it's not Jefferson that actually designed, even his own memorial, right? Obviously, that would have been impressive, dying and then designing your own memorial. That's not something, even Moses couldn't do that, right? But, yes?
Weren't the Freemasons responsible for all the design and architecture in DC?
Have you been to Alexandria, Virginia, where they have the Masonic temple?
Yes.
Yeah, if you go in, you can visit, it's a museum, you can go in and you can see all of the founding fathers with their aprons, at their Masonic lodge meeting and so on. So that's.
What's that?
Isn't there a painting of like everybody in with the Mason aprons, like laying like the
Well, that's they
cornerstone to
didn't have
Washington or
photography,
something?
so the painting
Well,
I'm
yeah.
thinking of
Within
was.
the US or the world?
Yeah. And Washington was the Grand Master, which is kind of interesting because, Julius Caesar was not simply the emperor, he was also the high priest. He was the pontiff, the pontifex, which, if you think about it, we still have a pontiff from Rome. It's Pope Francis, right? And we have the Vatican flag flying right across the street here, right? So Rome is still very much there. I think Gibbon's Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire kind of mistakenly assumes that Rome has gone away because of the decline and the fall, but in a sense, the Roman Empire is still there, as the church, of course.
The church is its own country within the city.
That happened during Mussolini's what kind of government do we call that? His fascist rule in Rome. He had a dialogue with the Pope, and I read the book, and I can't remember the Pope. I get the popes mixed up. But it was very political, of course. But what they did was they basically contracted that the Pope had physical control over the Vatican property. It wasn't just, it had been taken by the Italian government, and it was given back to the Pope in exchange for his supporting Mussolini in his programs, so on. Which, of course, helped the people then support Mussolini, because if the Pope is for Mussolini, well, then I should be, as a good Catholic, I should be for Mussolini. Mussolini recommended that Hitler do the same, and Hitler didn't. Because he didn't really want to. Well, I think for one thing, Hitler had more of a problem because he had a mixed sectarian environment. He had Catholics in the South, and he was from the South, actually Austria, right? But he actually had, of course, a lot of Lutherans that wanted nothing of that kind of association, right?
Wasn't he baptized, or I don't know what the Catholic terminology is when they bestow an honor upon someone, to Hitler as like the right hand of God?
Hitler, I think the Pope did support him.
Yeah, that's well
yeah,
documented.
there's all kinds of, well, in 1933, when he became chancellor, there was no sense that, by 1942, there would be a Holocaust basically developing. Although there's actually, I think, unfortunately, good grounds for thinking that the church was even, in a way, a supporter of some of that. Because, who would be the number one enemy of the Jews? Basically, the Christians, thinking that the Jews were the ones that killed Jesus. Sorry about that, but I mean there is that in the history, right? But so back to the kind of government. This is really interesting. In fact, if you're curious, I have the copy here. This is really two books in one. Because the other one is laws, so obviously Cicero is playing off of. Does anybody want to look at this, or is that like, well, no?
Is that the book that he wrote?
This is Cicero,
The Republic?
the Republic and the Laws, and it's the, what's the name of this? If you go to the library, there's like all the red books. There's like a whole wall of red books that are this size, and they are all the Latin classics. And so if you open it, you see the Latin is on the left and the English is on the right. Right. If you go to the green books, those are the Greek classics. So the same format, same publisher. Some of them are actually pretty cheap, and but I mean, so you can actually buy them if you want, but they are actually on the web. So why would you do? I basically always carry this one with me to the opera. This is my opera book because it fits in the. It's really light, and so I just been plugging away at the Republic, while I'm at intermissions and stuff. But
In your opinion, the comparison between Cicero's and Plato's Republic, and a vast, you know, and the
This is
reading
an
and what.
advance, this is an improvement over the.
Is it really?
Yes.
But yet Plato's is,
More famous. Well, one of the
And-
reasons you have to read
Time difference.
Plato to read Cicero. I mean, because what you're getting as you're reading Cicero is just, oh, Plato said, oh, I see, right? You know, so
okay,
so you need to read Plato first. So you know, I think of you know, the whole history of philosophy really, and the whole history of thought even, just kind of, you know, if we wanted to graph it, and we're hopefully knowing more today, right, than we started. But you know, it goes like this. So what you have are certain like arrows of development. To understand a point here, and this is why we teach the course this way, is you have to figure, oh, where did that come from, right? So Plato is down here, right? And you get, this is the famous quote by, I'm getting old. What's his name? Russell's tutor, who then became his partner in writing Principia Mathematica, Alfred North Whitehead. So Sir Alfred North Whitehead famously says in one of his books, I don't even remember which book it is, all of philosophy is a footnote to Plato. Right? So you start off understanding Plato, and then all the rest of the stuff falls into place. If you don't read Plato, you're like playing the game without knowing the rules. Right? So you start off with Plato. But the rest of that quote from Alfred North Whitehead who's, by the way, a really clear writer, you know, and writes little books, and so, despite the mathematics involved in the Principia and everything, he's actually a very good writer, and taught for a while at Yale, I think. So he wasn't just British, he was like in America too for a while. But the rest of his quote is, all of philosophy is a footnote to Plato, but all of contemporary philosophy is a reaction to Hegel. Right? So and the quote, that part of the quote though that most everybody sees is just that all of philosophy is a footnote to Plato, which is a darn good quote. That's nice and easy and short, right? How do you spell philosophy?
It's the first one.
So all of Western. Did I leave that out? Yes. Oh, wait a minute. Let's go to this one. So Alfred North Whitehead, influential 20th century. Where does it say? I don't see the quote. You see it? I should make it bigger so that. But it doesn't look like it has. So the safest general characterization of the European philosophical tradition is that it consists of a series of footnotes to Plato. So it's from his book Process and Reality, page 39. So even I mangled the quote because I just remember that little bit of it, you know. But that's not the whole thing, because if you keep reading, you know, that's how books work, right? You get to the end of the one sentence, but there's still more, right?
Keep going.
Does it
Count
not?
down or something like
Does it say that?
it's just a.
Oh, and to the wider context. So far as considers philosophy of the sun. The safest general characterization of the European philosophical tradition consists of a series of footnotes to Plato. But it still leaves out the rest of it. Well, I mean, it's got the rest of this, but where does the... So, you know, that's, I guess, the same kind of problem that we see with Jesus. You know, if Jesus says, one thing, did he say it just once? Probably not. He probably said it 50 times. And depending on which time you heard him, he probably arranged it a little bit differently each time. And so I'm pretty sure that this was the kind of thing that Whitehead would have said in more than one occurrence. And the rest of it that I remember reading somewhere was a real thrill for me, because at the time I was studying Hegel for the most part, who, as we get to history too, becomes, I think, a really significant point in our history. But I don't see him mentioning that. Okay. So let's do can you turn on the light for the front door? Because what I'm going to do is post-Aristotelians, Hellenistic philosophy, Roman philosophy. Just have one night really to kind of cover all the bases. I guess the first one to talk about, if you want to start on this side, you could, well, this is my map. You can make your own map. We're all the center of our map. Right? Cynics are trying to react to a couple of significant things going on in their society that are very stressful. Thanks to Alexander, you now have an empire. And when you live in a society that's everyone's agrees with you, right? You know, everybody knows that, God, is in charge of everything, and the priest is the one that knows what God wants, and your dad knows what the priest wants, and dad tells you, okay, go plant this rice today, and you go and do it, because you know your place. And there's no question you're not going to be depressed because you don't know what you should be doing with your life, right? It's very clear. Okay, plant the rice. Did you go do a good job? If you planted the rice correctly, you did a good job. That's pretty easy to know, because dad smacks the crap out of you if you didn't, right? So right? So it's pretty straightforward, right? So in a society like that, where there's just one meta-narrative that explains the whole point of life, and it's top-down, arranged, everyone knows it. So you can't go to someone else in the community who says, you believe that crap? None of that's true. No, there's no one in that town that thinks that way. Everyone is in agreement with you, right? So there's no stress that results from wondering what the purpose of life is. You know what it is. No one worries about it. Everybody knows it, right? There's no depression that comes from your feeling like your life is meaningless, because you know precisely what your life is supposed to do for you. Right? But once you become a pluralist kind of society, like, of course, we are, absolutely, right? You're hundreds of different points of view over what's true, etc., right? I mean, we have 250 Christian churches in Anchorage, right? That advertise, in the paper, right? 250 different types, positions. And they don't agree with one another, and yet they're all, of course, Christian, right? Well, if you can imagine growing up in that kind of society, you end up then having doubts about whether your particular point of view is true, that you grew up with, right? We have this problem. We might say, my 4 cardinal directions would be, let's see, put certainty at the top. That just feels more north certainty.